Hi, everyone. Good morning. We are just holding for about a minute or two for most of our registered attendees to sign in. So asking for a little bit of patience for about a minute or so. Okay, good morning, everyone. Panelists, if you all can hear me, just give me a thumbs up. Yeah? Okay. Good morning, everyone. My name is Omar Mohammed from the Cropper Foundation, and we are very happy and excited to have you all here today. This seminar seems to be of high interest to a lot of you all, and I hope we can um, satisfy the curiosity and the interest that many of you all have shown since we've sort of put this notice out to the public across our social media. So today really is going to be the first of a series of seminars hosted by us, the Cropper Foundation, on a really exciting project that is supported by the Inter-American Development Bank, along with some incredible partners, two of whom you will hear from today, the Inter-American Institute for Cooperation in Agriculture and NAMDEVCO. And this project, Making Agriculture Profitable and Sustainable, is really about how we can use markets and the power of markets and the power of partnerships to help stimulate a more sustainable and climate-friendly agricultural system here in Trinidad and Tobago, and hopefully the wider Caribbean. So today's seminar is really to showcase quickly what MAPS, as we fondly call it, is about. And that will be done by Alyssa Black, the project officer on MAPS. And then we will hear about two really key initiatives that the project is supporting. One, which is the development of a mobile app for farmers, and also support to the National Good Agricultural Practices Standard. That is meant to be, a key driver for sustainable, healthy, and environmentally friendly food here in Trinidad and Tobago, both of which are being supported in different ways through the MAPS project, and of course, through the support given by the IDB. Later down the line, in the next couple of weeks, we will showcase different elements that MAPS again is supporting around things like public education, around safe and healthy food, the use of cutting edge technology to sort of enhance what is possible in terms of data and information around farming, and also the ongoing support to farmers in terms of training and larger institutional support by the persons here as panelists and the other organizations that we're working with. So with that, I would hand this over now to Kavita Maraj from the Inter-American Development Lab, who's just going to say a few words of welcome on behalf of the IDB.
Yes, good morning. Thanks, Omar. So I'm with the IDB Lab in the Office of Trinidad and Tobago, and we are actually a member of the Inter-American Development Bank Group, more fondly referred to as the IDB or the IADB on any good day. Of course, not to be confused sometimes with the ADB, the Agricultural Development Bank, which tends to happen sometimes. So we are not the Agricultural Development Bank, we are the Inter-American Development Bank. And we have offices throughout Latin America and the Caribbean. And we really do tend to work with organizations, especially the IDB Lab division. We tend to work with non-governmental organizations like Cropper in areas and projects that we see has benefits throughout specific areas. One of the areas we really like to focus on now is called climate smart agriculture. And this project, MAPS, is what I think we can refer to as sort of phase 2 of an initial project that we worked on with CROPA a few years ago, where they really looked at infusing more sustainable farming practices amongst the farming community in Trinidad and Tobago. But we realized the missing link was really markets. So unless you could provide that sort of level of market and return to farmers, it didn't make any sense for farmers to invest the time and resources necessary to develop these types of chemical-free produce. And so that is how MAPS came about. And I know Alyssa will go into further detail. What I really just wanted to say is that we always enjoy working with CROPA. They are an amazing partner. They have both the technical and managerial capacity to get these projects done, to really get a term I don't think we use often enough in Trinidad and Tobago, which is value for money. And that is critical, especially now in this day and age. And given the fact that agriculture has become top of mind, we always spoke of food security before, but given what's happening now with COVID-19 and the pandemic, we see for ourselves how important food security is, and to make sure that not only are we getting enough food, but healthy food at the end of the day. We know we're all afflicted with NCDs in this country, so all of these things are related. And I'm pleased to see every time CROPA has any type of event, we always know that they're working with the right people because they're always able to bring the farmers on board. And we know for the farmers, time is money. And the fact that you have taken the time to join this webinar really speaks volumes of the organization and the belief that you have in this organization, as well as the understanding that CROPA knows the value of partnerships. And so we're also pleased to know that CROPA has been working closely with IICA, NAMDEVCO, and CARIRI, who have really been at the forefront as well of leading this sort of agricultural revolution and making sure agriculture is at the top of mind of everyone in Trinidad and Tobago. So with that, I will hand it back to Omar, and I look forward to hearing what the other panelists have to say today. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Sarita. And just for all of our participants on the panel today, like I said, we have Alyssa Black from the CROPA Foundation. We have Richard Rampassad from the Inter-American Institute for Cooperation and Agriculture, from now on known as ICA or IICA, Christopher Alexander from NAMDEVCO, and Ms. Diana Francis, the country representative for ICA. And joining us later would be Lisa Harinanan, who is also a member of the ICA team here in Trinidad and Tobago. And just some housekeeping rules. If you're a participant, you will not be able to unmute yourself unless we activate that feature. In the meantime, please use the Q&A boxes and the chat boxes at the bottom of your screen. You can use the chat function to give us any comments or suggestions as the presentations move along. You can also use it to ask questions. But if you do have specific questions around presentations of the project, you can put those into the Q&A box, and we will address those at the end of Richard's presentation, and then at the end of the entire seminar. So please use those two functions to get your comments and questions across. And we'll answer that live, or we will type in an answer if it's a simple question. So we would move on now to Alyssa, who will give us an overview of MAPS, where it started and where it's gone and where we hope for it to go in the next couple of months. Alyssa, you can share your screen now.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Let me just share my screen. Can everyone see?
Not yet.
Not as yet, Alyssa.
Not yet. Let me see. Now?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, and everyone is hearing, I assume. Right, so I am here today to just give you all a quick overview of the MAPS project, Making Agriculture Profitable and Sustainable, and also discuss some of the lessons that we learned along the way. So as a brief introduction on MAPS, you would have heard from Omar and Kavita that this project is funded by the Inter-American Development Bank. The executing body or agency is the Copper Foundation, and we're mainly responsible for developing and implementing the project, coordinating the project with stakeholders and other relevant partners. So the project started in 2017, but more so in 2018, and it's on its last leg. So its execution period is in July of this year. I just listed a few of our main project partners. Massey is also involved in this. CARIRI. We had the Ministry of Agriculture also, and a lot of private consultants and technical experts who have supported us along the way. So the project aim for MAPS is really to reduce the impacts of unsustainable farming practices on vulnerable watersheds. Right here. And by incentivizing local smallholder farmers in the adoption of more climate smart and food safety agricultural practices through access to high value markets. So as Kavita said, we really try to do a market driven approach to get farmers on board in the adoption of climate smart agricultural practices and more food safety practices by guaranteeing them markets and high value markets and increased profits for their produce. Before I go on, I'm just trying to clear the screen here so I could see my presentation better. Okay. So the implementation process, we really try to do like a pilot implementation process for MAPS. So a lot of the activities would have focused first on providing training, monitoring, and testing to guarantee or somewhat certify that farmers are adhering to international standards for food safety. We wanted to provide a market for farmers through a developed brand of vegetables promoted as pesticide safe as opposed to organic or pesticide free. And then we came up with a program called the Growing Safe Certification or Cultivation program now to kind of manage all of these activities. So at the right of the presentation there, of the slide, you'll see just a quick graphic of how the process took place. So initially with NAMDEVCO, we had a farmers meeting just to engage the farmers, firstly, let them know what the project is about. Then those who wanted to participate would have received training. After the training, they would have time to implement these practices on their farm and receive testing. So basically, if they pass the testing, they would be contracted and be able to supply for that pesticide safe brand. If they fail the initial testing, they can adjust their practices. We would work with them and they would get retesting done. So that's basically how the process went. So I'll go into a little bit more detail on each of those components or activities. So the first activity is the training and the monitoring aspect. So we had quite a few training providers throughout the program, the University of the West Indies, Faculty of Agriculture. We had technical consultants, we had the Ministry of Health involved, the Chemistry, Food and Drug Division, and of course IICA. So the topics of the training mostly focused around pesticide use and application, record keeping, and farm hygiene practices. We had classroom style training sessions directly with farmers, with groups of farmers. And we also utilized the extension services of the ministry, extension officers, and currently NAMDEVCO field officers. So we would have give them training, and then they would have provided that outreach services to farmers on more of an individual basis through their field support. So along with the monitoring aspect, during the farmers period where they apply the recommended practices or the taught practices, they would get that on-field support and monitoring from field officers and extension officers. So the testing, third-party testing, involved testing for pesticide residues using a multi-residue pesticide screen. So this screen could test for like over 300 plus pesticides for the active to identify the active ingredients in pesticides. And so it was based on maximum residue limits or MRLs. So crops were harvested or sampled at harvest to screen for any active ingredients or residue on that crop. And this was compared to the FAO Codex standards because they have a list of maximum residue limits. We also included microbial screening. This was recommended by IICA that we should include microbial screening for pathogens on the harvested crop and in the irrigation water on the farm. So testing bodies include international. So unfortunately, we don't have any local testing bodies here that conducts pesticide testing. So we had to reach out to international labs. CARIRI and Kaizen would have more focus on the sampling and the microbial testing. So some of the sample crops that we use, particularly for this project, was really just focusing on short-term crops, mostly those that are eaten uncooked, like lettuce, tomatoes, cucumbers. We did some pak choy and sweet pepper testing. And some of our sampling areas included Plumitan, New Grange, all areas pretty much throughout Trinidad. The high value market access component. So we have a relationship with Massey stores, and they will provide that direct market for our pesticide safe produce brand that we developed. We worked with the NAMDEVCO packaging house for processing and packaging the branded produce, just to maintain that quality and safety throughout the supply chain. So after the produce is tested, the farmers will deliver this to NAMDEVCO packing house, and they will do their other washing and processing to package the produce before it goes on shelf to the consumer. And a main thing to get farmers buy-in into the project is that we offered a set price for their goods that we worked with them to come up with, so in hopes of gaining increased profits, because the branded pesticide safe produce would be sold at a sort of premium price at these high value markets. And all of the revenue generated from this brand is actually flowing back into supporting farmers on an individual aspect to if particular farmers require anything, and also just supporting the program on the whole. So we'll go to some quick lessons learned from these 3 activities. I try to break them down based on the activities here. So with regards to training and agricultural chemical use, we realized that there's a need for more farmer-led and tailored outreach training, as opposed to, the indoor classroom style training, more reaching out to farmers instead of them coming to us. Through testing, so far we realized that once farmers adhere to the recommend pesticide training, they are okay with that, but the farm hygiene practices is more needed to mitigate the microbial contamination, especially in the water sources. Right? There's also a need for more efficient means for farmers to keep record of their pesticide usage. So right now, even the farmers under NAMDEVCO's program, they just use more like pen to paper kind of to keep records of the pesticides that they use. We would like to see more increased use of technology in general in the agriculture sector for better data capture and ultimately the better decision making. With regards to the testing aspect and the food safety, we definitely need more sustainable alternatives for guaranteeing or certifying the food safety due to the high cost of testing. So the project was supposed to actually develop a low-cost testing protocol for testing the pesticide residues on the crops, but due to us also having to source this international lab, the cost of that whole testing is quite expensive. So sustainable alternatives, more cost-efficient alternatives to just testing to verify producers needed. We also need more readily accessible and reliable information to the public and to farmers on chemical pesticides and fertilizers, for them to also make better decisions on their own, right? Without having to rely on us really informing them, right? With regards to market access, we definitely need to establish more diverse, high-value markets as opposed to just depending on supermarkets such as Marcy. We need to improve farmers' capacity to also brand and market their own produce, so equipping them with agribusiness knowledge and training, right? And then we also need to increase consumer awareness overall on food safety, because a lot of the consumers, as through our marketing research, they're still motivated by price versus the quality of produce. So to combat some of these issues, we linked with our stakeholders and formed partnerships and developed some new initiatives. Well, you would have heard of GAP or local TT GAP that will be coming about soon. And these two highlighted here in orange, including the farmer code keeping app, is what the other presenters will be talking about today. So I won't get too too much into that. We also have supporting the Ministry of Health National Pesticide Database. So this will allow public access to updated information on agrochemicals in hopes of mainly reducing the importation of these unregistered pesticides and farmers probably having to depend on these agri-shop owners for knowledge on certain pesticide applications. We would like to see more AI in the agricultural sector. So we have had the development of locally compatible artificial intelligence models to generate real-time farm biophysical data and information. And we'll be working with UE to develop this project. Another project that we'll be working with IICA is to develop about 6 to 8 model farmers as living laboratory centers for excellence. So we were actually working with farmers themselves. We're not just developing one particular model farm, but various model farmers across Trinidad and Tobago that the public, farmers, anyone that's interested in farming or the particular innovation that the model farm will be designed for, they could go there and visit these model farms and gain that on the field knowledge. We're also looking into more research and development into participatory guaranteed systems. So this is like a locally quality assurance system that farmers themselves can use. Like if there's a niche farmers group, they themselves can audit each other and audit each other's quality and practices. Another thing that we'll be working on is developing a SAFE campaign, which focuses on sustainable, accountable, fair, and ecological practices. So really to promote and push this food safety, generate more awareness, and hopefully increase the consumer demand for locally sustainable and quality food. And lastly, we would have supported e-markets through the development of online agricultural market platforms. RTT have their online platform already, and I think Y-Farm will be bringing out something soon. So just to conclude with all this information, all these new activities that are coming about, so we hope that these newly implemented activities will create a more enabling environment that can better support the adoption of climate smart and food safety practices by farmers and agriculturalists, therefore meeting our initial aim, which is supporting the rehabilitation of degraded agri-ecosystems that have been under pressure from overfarming and overuse of artificial input. And that brings me to the end of my presentation.
Great, thanks so much, Alyssa. You can go ahead and unshare. So thanks everyone for the comments and questions that are coming in. Like I said, we would answer the questions at either the end of Richard's presentation coming up next or at the end of the seminar. So please feel free to keep putting your questions in. You will see that some questions, we can answer just by text, and some of them I've highlighted that we would answer live. So we'd answer those questions in the Q&A sessions. So we would move on now to Richard Rampassad. He is the agribusiness specialist, I would like to think, from IICA, and he is going to walk us through IICA's development of a mobile record-keeping app for farmers that's supported under the MAPS project.
Thanks a lot, Omar, and a pleasant good morning to all our participants at this meeting. It's a really good pleasure to be presenting on building on the work that the Proper Foundation and IICA and NAMDEVCO have been engaged in under the MAPS project. And I want to present in terms of building a smart app, which Alyssa spoke about in her presentation. And really and truly, it builds on what the it builds on what Alyssa have been saying in terms of her lessons learned, where there is a need for a more efficient means for farmers to record their pesticide usage, and also that there will be a need for increased use of technology for data capture and for decision making. So those were some of the lessons learned that came out of a direct relationship of the training with the farmers. And therefore we saw a need for some mechanism or some tool to allow farmers to be able to do this, to capture the data, to make sense of the data so they can make proper decisions. And we're not only talking about economic and financial data in terms of managing their costs, we're also talking about in terms of information for their pesticide usage and the practices. So just to give a quick background, so during the development of the fixed prices that Alyssa spoke about, that we wanted farmers to be offered under the project, TCF were trying to find out what, when I say TCF, I mean the Proper Foundation, was trying to look at what is the best price for each of the fresh produced commodities that they're going to be selling to Massey. What do we offer farmers? And we want a price that, one, it covers their cost of production. Two, it covers the cost of using the safe pesticides where they would have received the training for, and at the same time allow them for, three, to make a profit. So with that being said, we don't want them also to offer a price where the market fluctuations because of the seasonality of the produce, the high prices and low price seasons. We don't want them to fall out of the project and leave because the prices are higher at the wholesale market or the retail market. So we want a set price that is very attractive and competitive, that even though there are higher prices at the market, they're not going to leave the project. So we had fundamental questions. And at a starting point, how do we know if farmers were making a profit with the price that we are going to set? So we needed to find out, first of all, what was the farmer's cost of producing or cost of production for producing at least one head of lettuce or 1 pound of cucumber. And that we didn't know offhand. And these were very specific to the farmers on the project. So we needed to get that information to make a benchmark and a reference point. And then that added to what are some of the highs and low prices in the market at different points in time, so that we could have generated that information. That information is was readily available through the NAMDEVCO NAMI system. But the cost of production to start with as our first benchmark was not readily available. So that was one of the fundamental gaps where we needed to have farmers know at any given point in time what is the cost of production. The second thing is that we wanted to know if the farmers are complying with they are complying with the grow safe practices that they were trained on, and the safe chemical usage that they were trained on, if they were really applying it and using it on the farm. Coupled with that is the TT gap, that standard that will be rolling out. We wanted to ensure that farmers are aware of the elements of the TT gap standards and how they are going to, in practice and in reality, use the TT gap standards in implementation on their farm for safe food production practices. So they needed a system in which farmers would be able to enter the information in terms of the safe chemical, the chemical usage, the fertilizer usage, the date of applications, etc. That farmers could at any point in time have records of this in a very easy, storable manner, easy to put in, simple to use, and it is stored in a wide database that they can access histories of record that they need to. And also that it will allow a mechanism where is a monitoring institution like NAMDEVCO, who will go on the physical farm to validate this information that they would have been putting onto the record. And also we needed a way of knowing what are some of the cutting edge technological tools that farmers are using to, as a climate smart and climate resistant production practices to help them in becoming more resistant and resilient to the climate change. So we wanted to be able to capture some digital tools that they are using. So the idea was to have an app that will have 3 main components. One is a farm record mechanism, and the farm record is in terms of cost of production information. The idea here is to be able to know at any point in time what is the unit cost of production farmers have with, and also the sales information. The second component is a traceability aspect where farmers will be able to enter information that if they, for any instance, there is a recall or some kind of breach in health safety or a claim that there's something is being done, there's a traceability aspect that will track exactly that produce right back to the actual place on the farm where this particular produce has been grown. And also we want to be able to know at any given point in time what are the digital tools being used by farmers in the sector for better decision making at a national level. So in terms of the specific component for tracking farm costs and cost of production, the app is going to be a very user-friendly interface with populated with the drop-down menus to eliminate as much as possible entering information, so farmers will physically and visibly see the options and click which one suits them. The language is going to be very simplified. It is very, as I say, user-friendly, the interface, and it is going to be in line with the current elements or the current headings as the Agricultural Development Bank cost of production profile currently existing. In that, again, the language is going to be simple and simplified so that farmers will understand exactly what information is going to be captured. We're going to place descriptions boxes at the top of each of the categories and headings so that farmers will know what information that we are looking for them to assist them in putting in the relevant information. We're looking at breaking down that into the capital and operational costs for the specific crops that they are growing, so that each item, it is going to have a general idea in terms of all equipment costs and capital costs, infrastructural, machinery, etc. that's on the farm, that's going to be used across all crops, and also very specific costs related to each crop in terms of land preparation, actual operations, mechanisms for harvesting, etc. With that information entered, it is going to automatically derive a unit cost of production based on the inputs in terms of quantity of produce that the farmer would have planted, and marketable yields, and also in terms of calculate a profit margin for each for a per unit, on a per unit basis and on an acreage basis. So the idea is, once the farmer has very simple information that he enters his field, these information is going to be on the back end automatically calculated for the farmer. So he will know at any point in time what is the real cost of production for his crop. So in terms of the traceability aspect of the app, as I said, there's three components: one for record keeping and cost of production, one for traceability, that is in terms of complying with the TTGAP and safety standards, and the third one is the digital tools. So for the traceability app, we're looking at again a simple user-friendly interface with drop-down menus. We're also looking to have so we're going to have data that is in line with the TTGAP standard for food safety. The farmers, it is going to be very useful for them in terms of the information that they put in, to be able to have that aspect of knowing at any point in time what they have used, who have used, the date they have used, the date they have purchased chemicals, when they have used it, etc. So all those fields have been basically developed in a draft. And if I to the right of my screen, these are some of the elements of the app that we are going to be doing. This is the rough element. Is basically in a form. The user interface is actually going to be developed very soon. The contracted provider for that is Faso Design Limited. So the elements are in terms of the production site, the farmers will have to enter information in the production site, the equipment usage, the actual production in terms of fertilizer, chemicals, etc., source of water, harvesting in terms of who harvested, post-harvest handling in terms of packaging material, who did it, the date that they did it, etc., transportation, vehicle number, driver, etc., storage, where it is being stored, in terms of the buyer, who it's being sold to. So if I could just show you very quickly some of the elements that have been developed, just to let you know also too, it's gonna come up very shortly that we had a consultation of farmers to fine-tune some of these elements. That was done last week, Wednesday. So if I, for instance, click on production site, it will take me to Okay, so it will be data entering the information. Who is the owner of the site? What is the address of the site? We plan to have a GIS mechanism here where they could actually pin the location. How many workers are on this site? Drop down menus again. What is the acreage of the site? Now these fields look open-ended, but they're all going to be closed with ranges and various drop-down categories, so they could put in information. What is the lot number? And if you want an option to go back to the next field. So same thing for production. If I go into production, there are the fields in it will contain, right? In terms of select the inputs that have been used for planting material, the fertilizers, the biostimulants, pesticides, etc. What was the crop planted? So you have an option to click and select which crop year that you planted. If you didn't have that on the list, another option to put in whatever crop that may not be on the list, but you're going to have a list that is very exhaustive so that there's no need to enter. What is the crop? It was suggested also to include what is the crop variety, when was the crop planted, what was the quantity planted, and in terms of the fertilizers, what is the trade name of fertilizers being used, when it was applied, who applied the fertilizer. We're going to include also a category for the rate of application, etc. And similarly for pesticides. So you get the gist of where we're going with this whole thing, right? So traceability aspect, I know that my colleagues, Dr. Lisa Harinanan and Christopher Alexander will speak more in terms of the TTGAP, but these elements were basically extracted out of the TTGAP standard so that it is already showing some compliance and a mechanism and a linkage to how we can go about implementing and also being able to monitor the operations on farm to what the standard has in it. For the app for digital tools, so it's really helped to keep at any point in time a status of digital agriculture. One of the things that we knew was lacking in a recent report, and a recent that I said probably about 2 years ago, that there was a joint select committee for Trinidad and Tobago to know what is the status of digital agriculture. We want to know what it is, at that point in time, the team at that time were fighting to get information to know what was the status. Various private holdings and farmers and processors and stakeholders generally who do production and marketing and agro-processing, they do on a private scale, but at a national level, there's no mechanism to capture this information. So when we want to make decisions, and especially incentive decisions from the Ministry of Agriculture perspective, to say, okay, what are the high demand digital tools or technological tools that are being used that we can provide some incentive support on for these persons who are using it. We need that information to know, because we can't make any guess decisions. In terms of a policy direction for promoting and enhancing digital farming and the digital technologies, we will need that information again also to know what are the farming practices in line with climate smart agriculture, of course, because we all know that we need the farm technologies to enable farmers to become more adaptable and innovative towards the whole aspect of climate change. So we need the information, and this is one aspect of starting to collect and have data stored so that we'll be able to know at any point in time what are the digital status of agriculture. So it's very important. All right, so in general, okay, the app will be a good tool for farmers, and not only for the farmers, but also for those institutions and end users. For instance, like the Ministry of Agriculture, NAMDEVCO, who will be doing the farm monitoring and evaluation. For the Cropper Foundation, to be able to continue to monitor the maps farmers and where they've been going. Is a very good tool also for persons like Massey and other supermarkets and retail markets to know what are farmers doing, are they complying, should I buy from them, etc. For the Agricultural Development Bank, it is because the mechanism and the app will allow for that real-time data collection of the costs and the sales and cost of production information. It is very easy for farmers to generate information from the app and print a report so that they'll be able to have real figures to show a donor, a funding agency like the ADB. But also one of the things we have to bear in mind is that the app, we need to have it incentivized. I just want to recall also too, there was a similar app that was developed by the called AgriNet. One of the main things was the agri expense component of that app, and I think it was not being used and promoted as it should among the community. There was one flaw to it, meaning that it was not demonstrated as a very easy to use tool for farmers, and we don't want to fall into the same trap like that. So we already have ideas in terms of how we're going to get this app to go to farmers and farmers to want to use it through more training. No, sorry, not more training, more promotional pushes and notifications of, like they say, fun facts, daily fun facts, or daily training guides, or daily agriculture tips, or new cutting edge information. Very 2 sentences, 3 sentences max, the prompts for farmers to see on the app to go towards it and keep them kind of engaged. So we have some ideas on how we want to get it rolling, because that's a critical thing to make sure that the app is being used and supported, and through also promotion of and word of mouth through persons who have been using it and see the benefit of it to do that and to continue using it, and also for mechanisms when there are farmers meetings and farmers engagements, etc., to continue to use that media and platform to promote that, to promote the app. So it will continue to be a work in progress even after the final app has been developed. We're going to have some, like any other thing, is going to have modifications, tweaking to continue to make it more relevant and make it more useful, and as much as possible detailed and realistic for both the farmers and the persons who need the information to use also too. Of course, it's going to be start to shape a new technological way of doing things in agriculture for record keeping purposes, and it's going to be at no cost to the Google Play Store, at least for the first two years, or for the future. Those are the things, some of the details we will still have to work out going forward. So the team for the app development, as I mentioned before, is FASO Design Limited. They're the main consultant recruited to develop the actual app. Of course, IICA, the Cropper Foundation, and NAMDEVCO. So that's the core team. In terms of the process, so the app, the FASO started work in December of last year. For 17 weeks, they anticipate to have a final app delivered to us that is up on the Google Store and operational. So in the meantime, so far, we have developed the dashboard menus, a rough draft of the dashboard menus. There was a first stakeholder consultation involving farmers and other stakeholders, and that was done last week, Wednesday, the 20th of January. So the next step right now we are going into is in building the prototype app. And after that prototype app has been developed, we are going back to the second rounds of consultation, where we'll fine tune and come back to, after that fine tuning stage, to one final consultation to make sure everything is okay and the stakeholders are comfortable and is relevant and we have the correct feedback, etc. And the final stage is to have it uploaded onto the Google Store. So with that brings me to the end of the record keeping app, and any questions, feel free to ask.
Okay, thanks so much, Richard. Just going through the Q&A list, I will leave the questions from Dionisio, Adesh, and Nadia's first question for the end of the session, because it's about maps in general. And Richard, I think you should be able to see the Q&A box. There's a series of questions from Nadia around the app itself, and then one from Chandel. So I don't know if you want to quickly check in.
Okay.
Yeah.
So for Nadia, can you highlight whether the project targets are on track?
Oh no, if you go down a bit.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so is the app and GAP TT certification linked to a price incentive based on level of certification? What do you anticipate as a level of usability based on the network and internet access, ease of use, literacy, group vulnerability? Okay, good question. So the first question, so the first part of it for Nadia is the app and GAP TT certification linked to a price incentive. That right now, I cannot answer for sure. It is the intention that those, and I don't want to preempt anything because I know Christopher and Lisa will probably speak to more on that. But I just think to say that it will, because you are complying and complying with the GAP TT, it is something that to be considered into having a price incentive. For the second part, what do you anticipate as the level of usability based on the network and internet access? So one of the features of the app is that there is an offline feature, because we know in reality, most farmers may not have data on their phone or internet access at their farm. So there's an offline feature where the information can be placed on the app at that point in time, until such a time where the phone is in a Wi-Fi zone or can get access to internet, and the information will automatically be pushed onto the server. So that answers the internet part of it. Easy to use, well, as much as possible for the literacy part. We're going to have the drop-down menus, which I discussed. So as really much as possible. For group vulnerability, one of the things we could look at and discuss is in terms of having some kind of audio feature where in terms of not only for those who may be visually impaired, for the app, we'll be able to have some kind of sound feature that will be able to prompt them in terms of what is the menu options, etc. That could be considered.
Richard, I think it may be useful for us to just jump into the GAP, because I figure that because the app and GAP, are pretty related. We'll give ourselves a good block of time at the end of the session to answer all those questions.
Sure. In the meantime, I will respond to them on the chat.
Great. That's actually perfect. Thanks.
Okay.
Okay, great. So I'm going to hand this over now to Dr. Lisa Harinanen. She's the Agricultural Health and Food Safety Specialist at IICA, and Christopher Alexander, who is the Manager of Quality Assurance at NAMDEVCO. So Lisa, you can go ahead and share your slides.
Good morning. Good morning, Omar. Good morning, everyone. All right, give me a second here to find it. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah?
Loading.
Okay.
It's loading.
It's loading. Yeah, tell me when you're okay.
It hasn't come up yet.
It hasn't come up yet. Oh, let me tell you what's going on. You see this new Microsoft, and they're putting everything to the cloud, even from your desktop. So you have to find a way now to get everything off the cloud, so that when you load it, it loads automatically. So it's on the cloud, so it's loading from the cloud.
Actually, what I could do, let me share it from my desktop then.
Okay. But I need control over it, right?
Oh, yes.
well, I need to stop sharing then.
Yes. Okay, so oops. Okay, so you may have.
You need to give me host privileges, I would think, or do I have?
Or I will just need to move it for you, I think.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
All right, that is quite a problem. Okay, all right. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us this morning. So as Mr. Mohammed would have indicated, my name is Lisa Harinanan. I'm the Agriculture, Health and Food Safety Specialist with the IICA office in Trinidad and Tobago. And we have been working together with the Cropper Foundation for a while now in doing collaborative projects with NAMDEVCO and other collaborators in Trinidad and Tobago. So my presentation this morning is on the TT gap good agriculture practices, the fresh produce requirements, and this is exactly what the gap is. So just for you all to know that if you see the standard, you would not see it as national gaps, not yet, but the name of the standard is Trinidad and Tobago, is a Trinidad and Tobago standard, good agricultural practices, in brackets gaps, and it's the fresh produce requirements. Somewhere along the line, we need to rename it as a national gap, but we're going forward with all of this, and so we'll try to get that done some point in time. Of course, the Bureau of Standard, Trinidad and Tobago Bureau of Standard would have been the one who developed the standard, as they have the authority to do such things. All right, Omar, okay, you can move to the next slide. Okay, so next slide. Omar, next slide, please. Oh, I am not seeing it.
Oh, are you all seeing the presentation?
I am seeing it, but I'm not seeing it on the main screen. I'm seeing two screens, a small screen on the top right hand side, where the slides have changed.
Just adjust your view, Lisa.
Okay, hold on. All right, go back to the next slide, Omar, please.
Sure.
Backward. Okay. All right. Okay. So. Okay, right. So this is just the slide with IICA NAMDEVCO, the collaboration with the MAPS Pro. So I'm starting off, I'll just do a little bit introduction on the IICA and the MAPS project. I know Alyssa would have already done most of it, Richard would have touched on it. So I just touch very briefly on it. And then we go towards the national gap standard. Now, this is just an overview for everything. We're not going into detail today. This is not the forum for it. And then Christopher Alexander from NAMDEVCO will come in and finish up with what's next in terms of the standard. Okay, next. Okay, so so just a MAPS timeline, and all the slides went already. So the first one, so we would have started with the MAPS project. So this is the MAPS timeline in regarding IICA, not regarding the Cropper Foundation. So to grow safe produce, which is the lettuce as the first crop is on the market. So we would have started in 2019 with some consultations with NAMDEVCO, us and the farmers and Cropper Foundation. From there, we went on to do, this is the pesticide training with Ministry of Health. So that's hazmat there. So they would have done, that's the only training we conducted so far with regarding the gaps, but this was a module on specifically for pesticide use. Then, so then testing came on board with CARIRI, and so that's slide just showing you testing 2019. Then NAMDEVCO pack house would have gotten involved in terms of packaging the produce for the on behalf of Cropper for Massey stores. And so then the other one, 2020, is meetings with the collaborators, especially the laboratory collaborators, Ministry of Health people, Public Health, Chemistry, Food and Drug Division, ourselves, and discussing how we go forward with the testing and the protocols, etc. And then, of course, for those of you who know, you will see the grow package. So that is where for the lettuce. All right, so that's just a just brief overview. So just to go forward, and I don't know, Alyssa mentioned it. Omar, go back, please. So the Grocer Cultivation Program, which as it is now known, it was really the Grocer certification program before. So those of you who would have seen that, the reason why it was changed is because for a certification program, you need to have some sort of documentation stating that it would have gone through some form of certification. So that with all of us, we attempted to do that, but that is a little bit out the remit of this program. So it went back to the Grow Safe Cultivation Program. So this is what the name of this program now is. So you wouldn't see it as a certification brand anymore, but Grow Safe Cultivation Program, meaning it's a Cropper branded. Okay, next one, Omar. So some of the other collaborative projects with the IDB funding ongoing, and all of these were mentioned already. So the National Pesticide Database, which Alyssa mentioned, this is being done by the Chemistry, Food and Drug Division, which is where the Pesticide and Toxic Chemicals Board lies. And so this is going forward. So Omar can give you more on that. The digital platform for fresh produce processors, agro products. So this is an IICA project with some support from the Cropper Foundation, where Y-Farm and Alliance for Rural Communities, RTT, they have both got some support to develop their online platforms to make it a little bit more modernized and accessible for farmers, and in an easy way to buy produce online and process products online, agro products, etc. And then the model farm is a model farmers. So I've seen people putting on the chat model farms. So it's a correction here. It's a model farmers program for climate smart agriculture. So just know that we can discuss that and one more if you maybe later down. Maybe Miss Francis, who is the IICA representative, can give you some more information, or Richard. So that's a model farmers program. And then the last one is where Richard already went through, which is the mobile app. All right, next one. And this is all based on the good agriculture practices. So in the gap development, and this happened because of PSIP funding from the Ministry of Agriculture to NAMDEVCO, and that was the Farm to Table initiative. So that started in 2019, 2020. And these standards intended for use by producers of fresh produce, right? So pay attention to this for farmers who need to be able to use this gap. Producers of fresh produce, and this is really to inform your food safety and your quality management system, and your primary responsibility is for compliance with the requirements. Now note that the gap is voluntary. It's going to be voluntary in the first phase until I guess protocols and all of that are put in place and to make it mandatory, if that is the way that the Ministry of Agriculture and NAMDEVCO wants to go. It is also intended for regulators, and regulators who are the ones who will have to do the inspection and facilitate the compliance and the regulatory requirements, and then the certification body, mainly for persons who would have to do the audits. Next one, Omar. And so before the GAP started in 2019, a visit was facilitated by IICA to NAMDEVCO to Costa Rica to see their operations. So this is an interesting way of, and so based on this, some discussions were ensued, and then it was decided to move forward with a national GAP. So the idea was what kind of GAP does Trinidad go ahead, does NAMDEVCO go ahead and do? Is it, do we want to go global gap? Do we want to go a local global gap? Do we want to go a national gap? And the decision was to go ahead with the national gap. And so that's how it started. Omar? Okay, so just go forward, Omar, just press and it will come up. Yes. All right, so so for those of you interested in the gap, the number is TTS 648-2020, right? So that is what you go in the TBS website and you look for that number on their website and you will get that is the gap. Now the gap, you can buy a copy at this time. It is available. It's a published gap. It's a little bit under $150, I believe. So in the first instance, TTBS was engaged by NAMDEVCO to develop the TT gap standard with support from IICA, and that's for the Farm to Table Initiative and a number of other key stakeholders. The committee or NAMDEVCO re-engaged the existing steering committee, and steering committee were formed since 2014 when we originally started to talk gap with FAO support at that point in time. And then somewhere along the line, support dropped and it was taken back up with the PSIP project. From the steering committee meeting, then the gap specification committee was formed, and the gap steering committee, so the photo you're seeing there are mainly the members of the gap steering committee, and so responsible for developing the standard with the Trinidad and Tobago Bureau standard as the secretariat. So Trinidad and Tobago Bureau standard is the key here who develop the standard and move the process forward. So that I myself, I was the chair, or I am the chair of this gap specification committee. So the standard was finalized and published in 2020. So we have a published standards, but I will let Christopher, when Christopher come on, he will give you where do we go from this published standard? How do we reach the point of rollout? Next, Omar. Okay, so what is the gap? So we went through most of this already. It's a set of operational measures aimed towards the prevention or minimization of risk to food safety. And this, you have to comply with the gap requirements to meet the set of criteria. It assures consumers health and safety so that the consumer who is buying produce and is buying it from a gap certified farmer, he would have some assurance that he's getting something that is safe and healthy for consumption. You will also maintain our international reputation by having these good agriculture practices. So if your produce is GAP certified, and so this is for trade, especially fruits and vegetables. But in going to trade, of course, we need to meet our local regulations first, and our local here in our own country before we export, right? So that will give us, persons a little bit more consideration in terms of the kind of activities that would be completed to meet the gap. Then it's also improve on the trade and competitiveness of the primary agricultural products. And of course, the farm owners is expected to play a key role here and for moving the good agricultural practices and complying with these practices. Next, Omar. So as I said, it was published in 20, and that's the number TTS 648:2020, Good Agricultural Practices. Note it's fresh produce requirements. So that's how it is named. And it establishes a minimum requirement of good agricultural practice for fresh produce, inclusive of fresh fruits, vegetables, herbs, spices, and root crops at production, harvesting, post-harvest handling, packaging, storage, or transportation stages. And of course, where offered for sale or supply to direct consumption or further processing. So this little paragraph here is key, and there's a snapshot, a summary of what is inclusive here. It's a generic, it's also generic meaning that it can apply to all farms. It applies to packing facilities, production systems, and the size of complexity. Note it is not for it's processed foods and not part of this. So we're not talking value added here. We're talking primary production. And I know some persons are also going to ask, well, does it cover organic? So this is not an organic standard. This is just general primary production. To get organic, we need to go towards an organic certification program. Next, Omar. So this is in a nutshell what the GAP standard. These are all the areas that are covered, and I think Richard went through some already regarding his for the mobile app, but it's just very run through. So it's management. It takes into consideration management responsibility. So these are just the main areas. I'll just give you a little bit detail in another slide. So it management responsibility, regulatory requirements, the production site, your equipment that you use, the planting material. Where do you get it from? Is it from a certified nursery, soil and substrates, your fertilizer and your soil additives, water management, and we know water is key here for good agricultural practices. Where do you get your water? How do you manage it? Is it safe for production? Is it safe consumption? Crop protection, your pesticides and all of that, your chemical management, your harvesting and your produce handling, the hygiene operations, so the food safety, where you come with your especially with your workers' welfare. Do they have facilities for hand washing, toilet facilities, waste, how do you treat your waste, your transportation, environmental management, quality management, traceability and recall, and this is directly related to the mobile app. And the food fraud, we know we have a lot of food fraud here. How do you control some of those things? And the records, you need records of every single thing. And then so this is all the, so if you go to the standard, you would get a little bit more details on all of this. Now, I should let you know that the standard is standard language. It is what you call standard language, so that they don't really have too much details. So we are working, the specification committee is still working to develop a guidance document, which will make it a lot easier, and I'll give you a lot more detail for each of these particular areas here, so that you can understand better and apply it in applying it on your farm. Next, Omar. So just to go very quickly, so like, for example, chemical management, what would chemical management, the areas are covered: agrochemicals, the use and the application, the storage, equipment, the empty containers management, any obsolete chemicals, how do you deal with that, your records, your MDS sheets, any other chemicals, for example, the harvesting and the produce handling. It will cover appropriate methods and techniques for harvesting, the containers, how do you treat containers, how do you treat the handling of your produce, how do you treat the water, equipment, your packaging, your storage, treatment, and pest control. The water management, as I said, agriculture water is very, very important and one of the most crucial area under the gaps. And then we have crop protection. How do you treat your crops for pests and disease? Next, Omar. Then we also have things like workers' welfare. This is training on all aspects and activities where the personal hygiene, sanitary facilities come in. So all of these are just details on the gap. The environmental management area, the control of records and records. We can't stress enough on records. And this is why we are hoping that the traceability app and the record keeping app will be able to assist farmers with their record keeping. And so the traceability and the recall, so the traceability is also going to allow you, well, that's what the main purpose of your traceability, documented traceability and recall systems that allow all produce to be traced one step backward and one step forward. That's in the event you have maybe a recall of, you have a microbiological contamination of maybe, let's say, one of a crop tomatoes, a hot pepper or something like that. And you need a recall, and therefore that's where the traceability comes in for the recall purposes. Next, Omar. And then production site and planting material. So as I mentioned, planting material already. So in the identification, selecting your varieties, your market, disease resistance, yield properties, etc. So all of these are mentioned in the gap. So if you wanted It's not freely available. You have to buy it from the TTBS website until maybe when NAMDEVCO gets to roll out, then they will develop their protocols and how farmers will be able to access copies. Next. So the benefits of the GAP, we went through this already: quality and safe produce. So it will ensure that you can get quality and safe produce. It will treat workers well, workers' welfare. Then you talk about sustainable production. We assuming, well, as once you go through the GAP process, market access will become easier. Control production, you're controlling your primary production. You're hoping that you'll get higher yields. You'll be able to manage your costs through the cost of production, increase your income, and that's ultimately the goal. Along with safe food for consumption, and then the traceability and its environment, hoping it's environmentally safe and builds trust. Now, one thing with the MAPS project, I forgot to stress on when we say grow safe. So the produce from the MAPS project, it is pesticide safe. It's not pesticide free. Remember, it is pesticide safe, meaning that you only allowed to use certain pesticides, and that falls well within the Ministry of Health regulation. So if you go outside and you go to a higher class pesticide that is unsafe for production, and when the test is conducted and it's picked up in the test, in the pesticide test, you can get thrown out the program. And so this is one of the interesting and the good things about this MAPS project. And then we also test for some microbial contamination. So those are the two good areas that that this MAPS project has taken forward, and should be commended for that. Next. Right, so this is just my final slide, and this is a slide from Alyssa actually, and it actually shows a nice snapshot of some of the things that are done in the field during the MAPS project. And NAMDEVCO extension officers would have worked very closely with the farmers who are in the MAPS program. So you see that so harvesting of your lettuce is harvesting of your lettuce for microbial testing for microbial contamination, and also to do the pesticide screening. Of course, water, you also have to test the water, where the water comes from. So is it at the point of entry from a tap? We also test sometimes. If it's water, you don't have to test it, but it's recommended. You test once in a while, but there are certain protocols for testing. How you get the water off the tap, you have to flame it and all of those things. So that's why we work very closely with the public health persons and CARIRI, so they are the ones who come up with the protocol and the testing and all of that. How you package the samples, how the samples get to the labs. And of course, I don't know if Alyssa mentioned it, but the pesticide testing is not done in Trinidad. It's done in a lab outside of Trinidad in the US. And because we do have the capability of doing the screen for for all the pesticides that we need to check to see what the farmers are doing. Right. So with that, I'll next slide, Omar. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to NAMDEVCO. I'm going to turn it over to Christopher, and he is going to go to give us a little bit more on some of these topics here. So what is next after the standard? So we have a published standard. So what's next from the standard? How do we go forward? Remember, we're still working as a team and trying to get all of this. But there was a question that was asked regarding the incentive, and Christopher could also answer it as well, but we haven't reached that stage in discussing with the Ministry of Agriculture yet, but all of that is in the plan to see how best that farmers can get an incentive for at least, doing this GAP rollout for their farms. All right, so thank you very much. And we could take questions at the end of Christopher's, when Christopher is finished with it. All right.
Okay, thanks so much, Lisa. Christopher, if you want to share your slides and get started.
All right, good morning, everyone. Omar, could you confirm if my
yes, working
unit up on screen?
Yep.
Okay, then, hi. Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm Christopher Alexander. As Lisa would have highlighted, my role is just to sort of highlight what are the next steps, seeing that we have completed the GAP standard, despite the fact that a lot of work, input, and effort was given into the development of the standard. It forms more or less the basic or the foundation for now the development of a national good agricultural practices program. So I will focus on the implementation plan, which will give an insight as some of the detailed steps as to how we will flow over the next couple of months up until we have the establishment or the implementation of this program, and then close off with sort of bringing it together in terms of how it forms part of NAMDEVCO's PSIP or NAMDEVCO's developmental program for the implementation and the successful maintenance of a GAP program for Trinidad and Tobago, seeing an upgrade to our current farm certification program. So as I would have highlighted, the standard forms the first part of the GAP program. Then we have other activities highlighted as such as the development of the scheme, determine which would be the players, having some effort or some focus on the regulatory framework, developing of the documentation to support this scheme, actually establishing a certification body, and then introducing the certification scheme to general public, and obviously focus on the producers. How do we prepare producers to become certified along with the other agencies? So each slide will pull out or highlight some of the key activities in each phase of the in each phase of the implementation plan. We would have gone through the developmental process of the standard, which was led by TTBS along with the different committees highlighted by Lisa. In terms of the development of the certification scheme, there will be a need for a review of the GAP standard to develop the guidance document that Lisa would have mentioned. Determine from that guidance document and from the requirements of the standard, what are the criteria to ensure that you are conforming with the GAP standard towards certification. Determine the governing structure. How will the framework be? This was already informed or proposed by the Bureau of Standards in terms of each different player in the scheme, how will they interact and what structure you'll have to ensure that the certification process, which will also feed into the establishment of the certification process and the development of the logo or multiple variations of the logo and the rules for the use of this certification mark or logo. So coming out of those activities, the two main takeaways will be the completed GAP certification scheme and the established logo for use that will identify you or your product as certified using the National GAP program based on the standard that has been recently published. Then we move into determine the players in the certification scheme. The scheme needs a scheme owner, which also is responsible for chairing both the steering committee and other subcommittees of the technical and certification committee. NAMDEVCO has, well, the steering committee has recently developed, and NAMDEVCO has sought cabinet approval to become the owners of the steering committee, the owner of the scheme owner for the certification committee, and also for the establishment of a cabinet appointed steering committee to oversee the GAP implementation and development. As Lisa would have highlighted, there has been an interim steering committee that has been more or less working, well, I don't want to say pro bono, but has been working as this interim committee established in 2014, and over the last 2 years, 2019 to present, has kind of taken over the majority of the work to get us to the completion of the standard. We are now trying to have these committee cabinet approved to ensure longevity and committed efforts by the required stakeholder organizations. Then there will be certification bodies, laboratory testing, as Lisa would have also highlighted, where we lack some capacity locally. So we look at the development or sourcing of persons who could carry out these testing on a routine or ongoing basis to support the certification program. Also, the need for auditing bodies who will carry out the actual third-party audits, and accreditation bodies which will ensure that the certification program or the GAP certified farmer or produce, the program itself is recognized and accredited both locally and internationally as we move the project forward. And at the core of the entire certification scheme will be the farmers or the farmers groups. And the right-hand side of the screen will give some of the deliverables that will come out from those activities in terms of the expectation for what is done. Then we move on to the regulatory framework. The standard is a voluntary standard at this point in time because the drive is for it to be market-driven, where the buyers or the market increases their demand for safe foods or for GAP certified foods, if you want to frame it in that aspect, which now they could either have an impact by influencing the producers in order to meet the market requirements or the market demands. Persons will want to become certified. And we can also take it another step where some of the large buyers or persons with different type of contractual arrangements or agreements can now incorporate the standard into those agreements. For example, have a clause stating that in order to supply fresh produce to our organization, you must be GAP certified. So this will sort of drive farmers now to put some key focus onto food safety and the food safety requirements for their production. The intention is to have the standard transitionary from voluntary to a more mandatory system as we move up the ladder in terms of our drive for food safety. As it gets to that mandatory phase, it will be linked to different government programs and government initiatives, as persons would have highlighted before, in terms of what are the incentives. And, you know, coming out of this, we have a roadmap in terms of the regulatory framework that is needed and how we are going to approach it and what are the different phases involved at each phase. Then we move to the development of the documentations for the scheme. There are certain standard documents that a certification scheme should have in terms of the master listing, the details of the scheme, the standard itself, what is the governing structure, the different committees in terms of reference, etc. The procedure that needs to be undertaken to enter the certification scheme in terms of and all the different aspects, confidentiality, complaints, appeals, monitoring and evaluation, approvals for the auditing body and the certification body, continuing different formats for the assessment, what happens in the case if there's a non-compliance or someone has a concern to raise, the details or the format of the certificate, and then reference to different ISO standards and other food safety or food regulation standards that falls mainly under the Ministry of Health and to some extent maybe under the Ministry of Trade. Make sure we have those documentation to back up, and then the contract or the different agreement that is used. So at the end of this process, you know, you have both develop and approve documentation to support the GAP scheme. After those activities are completed, now we move on to the establishment of the certification body. Currently, we have the Bureau of Standard Certification Division that meets most of the requirements, that meets the requirements for acting or for being a certification body. And we also have CARIRI, I believe, that are currently trying to get their ISO standards and different type of certification to ensure that they can also be options. Outside of that, locally, we may have to look regionally or internationally if required to have this role of the certification body filled. Ensure that, you know, they're familiar with the process and they meet the requirements of the ISO standards for certification body, which is 17065 as highlighted there. Beyond this, the scheme owner will highlight or recognize the certification body and give approval for there to be engaged in the actual certification of the persons interested, and also ensure that this body maintains accreditation. Then we move into sort of the heavier part or the meat of the implementation plan, which will be the development of the different training and education plan. How do we now communicate this information and how we do build the competencies of both farmers and stakeholders, mainly extension officers and other persons involved in the implementation of this GAP program, because NAMDEVCO may coordinate or own the scheme, but this is a national program. It's geared towards the uptake and the improvement or the development of the agriculture sector to ensure that we have some type of basic requirements that is being met to ensure food safety and good practices throughout the production of fresh produce within our local sector. Then we have the development of the communication plan and marketing plan, which will go together. So this will be sort of expressed by a hosting of several sensitization and awareness workshops and seminars similar to these, and giving more details, and then further training programs or training workshops to ensure that we can effectively communicate and build the capacity of those persons involved. And then we have the preparation of the producers. What, as a farmer or producer group, do you need to know, do, or understand to become ready for the GAP program? First, we begin with having an understanding of the requirements of the standard. One way, as Lisa would have highlighted, is access to purchase the standard. There's both the e-copy available through the Bureau of Standards website and the hard copy available through the website, which will give you a sort of more intimate understanding of the requirements. But as also highlighted before, the guidance document will sort of provide that detailed interpretation for the farmer, for the user, in how do I actually now get myself ready to meet the requirements of these standards. Have an idea of whatever documentations that you need to develop, for example, the different food safety manuals, standard operating procedures for activities carried out on your farm, different checklists, and have an idea of what is the accepted format for these things, and ensure record keeping are kept to meet the requirements of the scheme and as outlined in the GAP standard. And then producer will need to have some type of internal control system. But these are for larger groups where persons are seeking certification as group, like maybe a farmers group for a specific area might want a group certification where we'll have somebody internally responsible for monitoring or maintaining records of the individuals in the group, whereas the group owner will be certified and reviewed to ensure that he has this process in place for maintaining, so for the maintenance of the thing and maintaining the standard for purposes of certification, and then become familiar with the registration and application process. So that gives an overview of some of the detailed steps that are needed from moving us from the stage of the development of the standard to the actual implementation of the program. This national GAP program forms part of our PSIP, or part of the NAMDEVCO's developmental approach to food safety, to carrying out some of the main functions that we are responsible for. I can say we would have successfully completed stage 1 thus far in terms of the research and the development geared towards the use of the GAP standard. Once cabinet approval is received for nomination of NAMDEVCO as a scheme owner and the establishment of the steering committee, we will move into the second phase where we're going to upgrade the current farm certification and monitoring program towards this national GAP program, with the hope or with the drive to ensure that all different organizations are involved. The sensitization awareness campaign, as I would have highlighted, will sort of bring a familiarization and aim towards having the uptake of this standard. The development or the establishment of a model farm, a GAP model farm, has the intention of seeking 2 avenues where we have identified holding of land next to our Piaco packing house, where we propose to establish a model farm that will be a practical approach for farmers interested in being GAP certified, because the farm will intend to also be certified and maintain its certification as a producer. And that will also comprise of a training facilities for persons interested or involved in the GAP program. And then we have the whole marketing aspect, where we seek out large markets, so we seek out consistent markets for fresh produce in most places, trying to displace some of the imports for fresh produce, and also trying to provide an option of safe food that is grown according to the good agricultural practices, where we have the commitment of those buyers that once GAP certified, they will engage the farmers in direct production. Currently, there are a few initiatives that has already been happening with the intention that these farmers will eventually become GAP certified. And lastly, we'll be building the capacity for ongoing food safety testing, or having a program involved to ensure that the testing can happen very routinely to ensure that the requirements of the standards are being met, and that we could actually call our locally produced food safely grown, as highlighted with the teachings and the drive of the MAPS project. That brings me to the end of my presentation. I thank you very much. And I guess we will take some questions at this point in time.
Great, thanks so much, Christopher. I'm glad to see that we still have 90% of our participants at the end of all the presentations. We'll just ask, we were meant to end at 10:30. I'll just ask the indulgence to stay on until 10:45 while we answer all of the questions. Just a reminder, you all should be able to see the Q&A box, and you'll see that the panelists have answered quite a substantial number of questions. So you can actually go into the answer tab and read the responses. We've kept a couple questions out in the live section. Many of the questions, like Dionisius, around the use of renewable energy technology, and I see we also have quite a few that relate to this idea of the model farmer. So I'll just ask Ms. Francis, the IICA country rep, if she wants to come in for a couple and give a couple comments around the model farmer initiative. Diana?
Hi, Omar.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. My connection is kind of unstable, so it's dropping. The question you asked was what again? Sorry.
If you can just give a quick overview, since a lot of comments and questions sort of relate to the model farmers.
Quickly, the model farmers is a twist on the traditional understanding of model farms. We're promoting, or we're using model farmers instead because we really want to put a focus on the person behind the farming and the farming practice. We know that as Christopher, Richard, and Lisa have all said, and Omar and your team in the TCF have all said, that the practices now have been defined, the national GAP practices are published, so there is no mystery about what the correct practices ought to be. And therefore, what we're trying to do is to find a way to work with farmers who are almost ready to help them to bring their standards, as both the GAP standards, up to par, while at the same time strengthen the capacity to do climate smart farming. The whole thrust is on using people already farming in the sector, who are already on their way to becoming resilient, to try to see what the project can do to enhance the capacity to deal with all, well, not all, but the major threats of climate change on the farming enterprise, whether open farming systems or semi-protected systems for fresh produce. So the model farmers really is an investment in what the farmer is already doing to become resilient. And the project will work alongside that a crop of farmers so that they can become the poster child, for want of a better expression, of climate smart practices or climate smart farming that also incorporate food safety as per the national GAP, and also incorporate the digital age in terms of record keeping, which is going to be very important, and also are able to manage their marketing of their produce using the tools that have been established by the Grocer and the MAPS project. So the understanding or the philosophy is similar, except the focus is really on ensuring that the human aspect of farming is more of the focus. And once we can get that change in mindset that drives a change in practices, we are hoping that that core of model farmers can be used now for peer-to-peer support, peer-to-peer trading, peer-to-peer troubleshooting, peer-to-peer development within the farm sector to allow a spread and more uptake of practical and realistic and locally appropriate climate smart farming systems that allows the farmers in Trinidad and Tobago to be able to, even though you are impacted, to be able to bounce back better, for want of a better expression, after you have climate change impact. It could be flooding, it could be the drought season, it could be infestation of pests because of climate change, changing temperatures and so forth. So what we need to do is we have already developed an idea of what those climate smart farming practices ought to be. We will go through the farming database that NAMDEVCO has in terms of to get farmers who are ready. We'll have a conversation like this on what we are thinking, because we really want to get it practical and for the farmers, and get guidance from the farmers in terms of what they think, what are the main challenges, and how we can adopt climate smart farming practices. And then we will roll it out where investment will be made to allow the farmer to basically do what is required to transform into a climate smart farming system. And he or she becomes a model farmer. And then that model farmer has a group of 5 or 10 or so people within their network that they can spread the word out. So Omar will tell you that all investment will be allowable except permanent structures on the farm. So we will work very closely with the TCF, NAMDEVCO, and other partners to select the farmers, build the criteria, select the farmers, and manage investment process to get them to be a model farmer for climate smart farming. And hopefully that farmer can be used as a vehicle to transition the sector into that kind of system. So that is where we are right now. And you'll notice that everything is being done under the MAPS project because everything is connected. I hope that answer give you a synopsis.
Great, thanks so much, Diana. So I'm just going to touch really quickly. So that answers also Dionisio. I hope I'm pronouncing it correct. So the model farmer would look at, we're trying to touch on all aspects of climate smart agriculture, which will include, as you would know, reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. So we're going to explore how farmers can integrate things like renewable energy and so forth. So we're trying to build a broad-based approach to a model farmer. For Mr. C. Goben, I don't see him here again, but I'll still just touch quickly on how we address the pricing. It's a very interactive process with the farmer. We look at their reported cost of production. We look at least 4 to 5 years of historical prices for the particular product. And we work with the farmer to develop a standard price across all months. Based on the averages over the last 5 years, their cost of production, and the percent increase in profitability that we want to get. So the farmer is able to get the increase in profitability before it even hits the market. So they don't have to depend on the market end of the interaction. So they get their profitability margins in advance. For Nadia, I know Nadia asked a really good set of questions that Richard, I think, answered, and it will be in the other tab. But just from a project perspective, we are on target for many of the project targets with the IDB that relate to the number of farmers we train, the number of farmers we connect with, alternative marketplaces. There are some, we were very ambitious for a couple of targets related to testing, but at that time, testing was actually going to be low cost. Well, that was the intention, but of course, that's not the case now. So we have some, but the IDB Lab, which is the innovation lab of the IDB, is pretty flexible as a donor in allowing you to adjust your project activities to reach your sort of intermediate outcome. So we are on track. And let me see, is there anything else here? Okay, so I think, a couple of people have asked about how could they get in contact with us. Richard, I think, has put his contact information there. You can email us at the Cropper Foundation. You can email Alyssa, who you saw, at ablack@thecropperfoundation.org. So that's the Cropper Foundation, no spaces or anything, .org. If you want to contact us, and then we can then forward your request or comment to any of the panelists. And let me see. Yeah, so get in contact with us. We have access to the registration list, and Christopher has just put his contact information in the chat as well. We will compile the question and answers and send out to all of the registered participants as well. And we will also send a copy of, a recording, the copy of the recording for the session as well. And we will be having, like I said, a series of other seminars related to different aspects under the MAPS project. So we will also make that schedule available to everyone who is registered as well, with the hope that you all will also tune in then. So that's it for us. Thanks for giving us a bit more minutes of your time. Thanks so much for all of the panelists you know, a great partnership that has been started on the maps, and we hope that it continues. And thanks to the IDB again for their support. So have a good day, everyone. Stay safe, and we will be in touch soon. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone, and thank you so much.
Okay,
Looking
bye,
forward to
everyone.
Bye-bye.